Now, I want to hear all about your new project over at predictableshow.com, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what you saw play out in the California elections last night? Are we going to get Governor Steve Hilton? Is that what the markets are showing?
No, they're not, unfortunately. I mean, I would love to see Steve Hilton win, honestly. I think he'd be great for California. I think maybe a different approach than anything else they've been doing is the right way to go. It's going to be tough in a environment like this, in a state like California, to try to win as a Republican is, it's one of the toughest things you can do in politics right now. So I think both Hilton and, in LA, I'm sure we'll talk about that with Spencer Pratt. Both of them performed, I think, really well in a very difficult environment. But that's really more of a sign of, I think, what you mentioned just a minute ago, which is real catastrophic leadership over a very, very long time. The fact that there's an opportunity at all for a Republican in the state is really amazing.
Now, part of your new project is that you are approaching the news through the prediction markets. So you are looking and trying to make your assessments on what's happening in politics based on what people are actually willing to put their money on, places like Kalsi, Polymarket, a couple other different markets on there where you can really track, how elections are shaping up. Do you feel like prediction markets have lived up to the hype in terms of being a good barometer of where things are going in politics? Because I've seen some wins and some, clear illusions when it comes to the
Yeah.
prediction markets.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think they are our best tool to try to understand what the future is. That doesn't mean they're perfect. And frankly, as a person who runs a media company that covers prediction markets, I'm glad they're not perfect because that's where the opportunities are, right? When we see something with a low percentage possibility that comes through, that's where you can really, make your money. And so, I'm glad they're not perfect, but they are a really, really good tool. I'll give you a good example of this from last night. Iowa had primaries going on yesterday, there was a big story in the New York Times in the morning. It was about the Democratic Senate primary, and they put these two candidates next to each other. They laid out their incredible personal histories, as they pointed out. They went through back and forth of this amazing, dramatic back and forth. What could happen in this race? And if you were to read this story as a normal news consumer, what you would get is a picture of a very close 50-50 race that could go either way at any moment. And then you go over to a prediction market and you look at what they're saying about this. And I believe Turek was at 93% going into the results. This was not even a competitive race, and Turek won it easily. They called the race very quickly. People who looked at prediction markets knew this in advance. People who read the New York Times on the morning of the election were left with this sort of soap opera that this was a 50-50 race. They were misled and didn't understand the truth. And look, prediction markets aren't perfect. I'm glad they're not perfect, but in reality, they are our best tool at understanding things beyond polling, beyond news coverage, beyond punditry. The fact that we can cut through all that stuff is a real advantage we didn't have all that long ago.
Yeah, I've heard some really interesting stories just over the past week. I mean, there was a bar in New York City. I think you've probably saw this, but the Jeffrey, they used Kalshi to hedge on their Knicks promotion. They were going to offer drinks on the house at this bar in New York City. And so what they did is they hedged $5,000 on Kalshi that the Knicks were going to win. And then it basically just paid for all of the drinks that they ended up buying for everybody. There are all these sort of interesting use cases that I don't think people have really thought of when it comes to prediction markets, of how people can really apply, these actual functioning markets to cover their risks. When you're a bar and you offer drinks on the house to everybody, if the Knicks win, that's an expensive night for you. But if you're actually going to do it, you might as well put some money on the line and have the Knicks pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there are tons of opportunities like this that people really haven't thought of yet. A lot of people will, we don't use the B word, betting, on my show because it's really, we try to do it in a different way. We try to use this as an investment tool, and we've had real success with it when it comes to elections. I think because, people are, the way they're used to thinking about, let's say, sports. They think about sports betting and everyone talks about it in that context. But, it's a brand new technology. We're talking about something that NASDAQ has invested billions of dollars in, right? This is not some fly by night thing. And the small business applications are incredibly exciting. I was talking to a friend of mine who runs an air conditioning company here in Texas, where I am. And, Texas, you may have heard, it gets a little warm in the summer. The difference for him in a hot summer where it's, 95, 100 degrees every single day, and a mild summer, the difference with his business is substantial, right? If it's really hot here, people are running their air conditioners constantly. He's out fixing them all the time. And it's a really big period for him as far as his business goes. But what he can do on something like Kalsi or Polymarket is go on and hedge the temperature. And if there is a mild summer where maybe he doesn't have as much business, he can cover himself and actually take the guesswork and Mother Nature out of his business entirely. That's an incredible advantage, and there are thousands and thousands of those types of opportunities for small business owners as these markets developed. It's just we haven't even begun to investigate them yet. There's a really exciting future ahead for these things.
Yep, it's not all fun and games. It's not all recreation. There's a real practical use case to these things. Stu, you have flown the nest from the Glenn Beck Show as a co-host and sidekick for many, many years. I hope that's not an abrasive word, but
not at all.
Just tell people how to stay in touch with you and follow your new project. You're still involved over at the Blaze, but let people know how they can watch you these days.
For sure. I do a show on the Blaze called Stu and Dave Do America with Dave Landau, comedian, really funny guy. And we talk about all sorts of stuff on Predictable with Stu. It's on YouTube at Predictable Show and predictableshow.com. In fact, I know you're a big Star Wars fan. I was able to go on to the Rotten Tomatoes markets and get an under 65% on Mandalorian and Grogu. Cashed in on that one. There's all sorts of stuff. Culture, sports, we talk about it all, mainly elections and trying to understand the elections a little bit better. So join us, predictableshow.com.
If you know a Star Wars movie is going to suck, you might as well make a couple dollars off it. Stu, thanks so much for being with us.